Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our webcast tonight. This is Neurodiversity Disclosure in the Workplace, sponsored by Landmark College. I am Mark DiPietro. I'm the Vice President for Marketing and Communications at Landmark College. Really exciting panel tonight. It's a great topic, and we have some great folks to tell you about their own personal experiences and some of their professional advice. We have Jan Copeland, who's the director of our Career Connections office at Landmark. We have some Landmark alumni, a current student who has some workplace experience to talk about, and Denise Brody is our special guest. She is a senior contributor at Forbes and also the founder of Rebel Talent, which helps businesses appreciate neurodiverse talent in the workplace. So I'm going to jump right in, turn things over to Jan, and let her, actually wanted to ask Jan if she could provide a definition of neurodiversity. That's a word that's become quite common, but there are many different definitions of it. So I'd like Jan to explain a little bit about what we mean when we say neurodiversity.
Everyone, thank you so much for attending this session. So let's start off with an understanding of what neurodiversity means in the Landmark community and now actually the larger community. Typically, neurodiversity is associated with someone who has an autism diagnosis. Up until about 5 years ago, when someone referred to someone as being neurodiverse, it meant that they were on the autism spectrum. But recently, especially within the last year or so, the definition has broadened to include other individuals who have a learning difference, diagnosed learning difference, and it's become even broader to include, in some situations, PTSD. So it's neurodiversity is really refers to a brain-based variation. Our culture, our society right now is a neurodiverse culture where we have individuals with brain-based variations as well as those who are neurotypical. So at Landmark, when we use this term, it brings in many other diagnoses apart from just autism. And Mark's going to share my slides. Yes. To get us started. So as far as disclosure, what I encounter all the time as a career counselor, just to give you a little background, I am the director of Career Connections here at Landmark College. And my office is charged with working with students who are interested in employment after college, getting an internship while enrolled at Landmark, and really just career readiness development. And frequently we work with students who are seeking employment and figuring out their next steps. And the question of whether to disclose or not to disclose their learning difference presents a huge dilemma. Should they do it? Should they not do it? What are the benefits? What's the detriment? So today's dialogue will give you some ideas of, what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages, and help you be informed about next steps. Next slide, please. So what's really important is to realize when you're considering whether you're going to share your learning difference is thinking about environmental fit, what job you're going into, what organization you're interested in, but really embracing the idea of self-advocacy and saying, when you're sharing your learning difference, if you decide to disclose, that you're going to speak to it from a strengths-based perspective. And self-advocacy, as this slide explains, is really an important factor in your success in employment. Also, going forward, as you speak about your learning difference, or if you decide not to disclose, it's still really important to inform your employer of how you work best as an employee and what supports you need to be successful. And some of those have to do with your strengths and your learning style and making sure you have information for yourself for the accommodations you may need in order to be successful. And those accommodations may be things that are quite simple, or they may require a few bits of support from your employer. Next slide, please. So if you decide to disclose, you need to determine when is the best time, how to go about it, what might be your strategies for doing so, but all the while you're going to want to know the law around accommodations and the employer's obligation for you as an employee to provide reasonable accommodations. If you are not sure about the law around, it's called ADA, the American Disabilities Act, that requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations, you can research it. You can check with your career office. If you're a Landmark student, we're happy to help you understand your rights. But also there's a great resource called the JAN Network, my name, JAN Network. And they have a lot of helpful resources to understand the law and your rights as an individual with learning differences. And we're going to get into the when, how, and the strategies a little bit further into our webinar. But just real quickly, you might want to think about the when as far as, do you need support or accommodations in the interview process? As you look at the different applications for the positions you're interested in, are they overwhelming? If you have a dyslexia diagnosis, is it a lot of copious material that you could use help navigating through? One thing to consider if you do decide to disclose is a strategy of having a disclosure script so that you write out or verbally share what your strengths are, your skills for the position that you're applying for or you're interested in, and what accommodations, what supports you would need in order to do that job well. What I want you to think about when you're considering whether or not to disclose is, sadly enough, right now in society, there's a lot of assumptions that are, I believe, are uninformed about neurodiverse talent and abilities and what students and employees are able to do or not able to do. So it's important for you to go in educated, aware of the talents and the gifts you bring as someone who is neurodiverse. And so when you consider not disclosing, I want you to try and consider it is similar to, in some situations, someone who's diabetic and needs insulin to live. And there's no weakness on that individual's part to use insulin in order to function through their day. What I'm hearing more and more from employers is they so appreciate when individuals who have learning differences or are neurodiverse disclose their learning difference, because they can be well supported and given the opportunity to do their absolute best in the job. And we'll get into the details of this a little further into the webinar, but I just want you to hear from my perspective as a career coach and the employers that I work with, they strongly recommend disclosure. Next slide, please. Also, in thinking about self-advocacy, I also want you to be aware of self-determination. Someone who is self-determined, they dictate, they map out their decisions, they take action in their lives, and they are the masters of their destiny. So consider doing some research into self-determination theory and empowering yourself with knowledge and, as I said earlier, knowing the assets and the strengths of your learning difference. Sometimes at Landmark, we refer to those as cool abilities. Next slide, please. I think at this point, we pass it off to some of our students as well as our alumni who can speak to their personal experiences.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, so I'm going to ask Andrew Garcia to talk a little bit about his journey. Andrew is an associate degree graduate from Landmark College in, I believe, 2011. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, and is now working for Chewy. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so I did graduate from Landmark College in 2011 with an associate degree in liberal studies. Um, Today, I am a senior talent sourcer at Chewy, the pet food company, not the granola bar. Um, and I've spent more or less my entire career in talent acquisition. First year of my career was in tech support. Found that wasn't the right thing for me, and ultimately kind of guided my way into HR and talent acquisition. When it comes to disclosure in the workplace, my experience with that, frankly, up until my last job was that I didn't disclose. Didn't feel comfortable doing it. Didn't really know how it would be perceived. And, to Jan's point, I didn't really have a strategy around having the conversation. The aha moment for me, if you will, came when I was at New Balance. And, I was having a conversation with our senior vice president of HR, who I kind of reported into. And I was explaining, why and how I operate differently. And explained, everything from, why I don't look you necessarily right in the eye when you're talking to me, but I am still processing. I promise you I am going to respond. It just might take me an extra second. Why I fiddle with things in my hand in order to take that distractible part of my brain away from being distracted. And the aha moment really came after I had explained everything to her, and she said, you know what? My daughter struggles with the same thing, and that makes a lot of sense. And it was this rush of, I guess, comfort, of ease that kind of came over me in the sense that, I was able to articulate this thing I had always had this sense of anxiety over to someone, and, they didn't judge me for it. They didn't recoil from it. In fact, it connected a lot of dots for them. So from that point forward, I've always disclosed. I tend to have a frank conversation with my manager and with folks that I work directly with around my work style, how I operate differently, how, rather than thinking outside the box, I tend to think as if a box didn't exist, and that can cause people to react differently at times. But there's a process, and from that point forward, things have tended to be a little bit easier. I've had fewer of the weird looks and more of the, oh, okay, kind of reactions. So that's been my experience. My recommendation is disclose. Certainly there's a strategy to go around about it. But we are our biggest advocates. And while, HR works for the company, they can provide what you need if they know. So, I guess that's my 2 cents on it.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I forgot to mention to our viewers, there is a Q&A button on the right side of your screen, and you can type in a question anytime you want, or a comment, or whatever you'd like to, in the Q&A box. After all the presentations, I'll be fielding questions to the presenters. So please do send us your questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. And with that, I'm going to introduce another Landmark College alumna, Rachel Brown, who is a 2016 bachelor's degree recipient from Landmark and who now works for Johnson & Wales University. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much. So yes, I graduated actually in 2014 with my associates, then followed up and stayed in for the first bachelor's class in 2016. So I'm one of the first graduates for that program. I did eventually go on and I completed my master's in March of 2020. But in terms of just disclosure in the workplace, I'm a really big advocate for that. I just find work is so much easier when I know that I have those kind of just simple accommodations, and most places somewhat inherently do that. So if you have like a big meeting, whether that's in person or over Zoom, they typically send the PowerPoint afterwards as a recap to most employees, or they send the agenda beforehand so people can bring their own notes. Those are things that I require. I need those in order to be successful in the positions I have. And I need that in order to be sure that I'm meeting the qualifications of the position, but also, doing that exceeded potential as well. But in terms of when I disclose and how I disclose, it really just depends upon if it's required in that setting. So when I'm applying to positions, I don't necessarily disclose during the application process, but if it comes up during my in-person interviews or phone interviews, that is something I will mention. It's always taken well. It's never like, it's always, okay, all right, that's something we can totally accommodate. This is what we're able to offer for that. When it comes to onboarding training, so that's when you are hired and you go through the training process of learning the position. That is something that I'm very well spoken about. I always make sure that whoever's training me, whether that's a group of trainers or one-on-one training, that I make it very clear that I will ask a lot of questions. I will need follow-up notes, and I need to be shown to me more than once, because my learning disability specifically is reading, writing, and decoding. So I need that additional support to make sure I can find that mental muscle memory of how it was shown to me. So that way I know that, when I look back at these notes, it's something that I'm already familiar with. So when you go through the process of that, you're going to need to just know your strengths and any challenges you have. So that way when you have that conversation with your supervisor, manager, boss, or even if it's eventually funneled to HR, that you have that proper documentation of what that support will need to be and how to best facilitate that in wherever you're working.
And I should disclose that Rachel was an intern for me in the marketing and communications department at Landmark. And just to illustrate what you're saying, obviously all Landmark students have some learning difference, but everyone's learning style and everyone's working style is very personal. And Rachel was always very good at self-advocating and explaining to me how she needed to be communicated with and what was going to help her. And that really made for a smooth working relationship. So our next speaker is a current Landmark College student in our computer science program, Wolf Elkin. Hi, Wolf.
Hi. It was bound to happen eventually that someone would do it. So yeah, my name is Wolf Elkin. I am a computer science major at Landmark College, just because they don't currently offer a math major. I was diagnosed at 22 years old, older than almost anyone else I know. So I spent the first 2 decades of my life not knowing that I was neurodiverse. And I had a lot of attitudes that I'm not proud of towards the neurodiverse community in that time. So I had a very strong aversion to disclosing once I did find out that I was neurodiverse. I had a very strong aversion to disclosing. But due to some experiences that I can go into more detail, and I've seen what can happen if you don't disclose. I'm sorry, what was the question?
So Wolf, if you don't mind sharing that experience, I know you
Sure,
had some experiences of not disclosing, and that
right, yeah. So it was shortly before I came to Landmark. I had already been in the workforce for a while, or had been trying to get into the workforce. I graduated. I also graduated in 2011. I graduated from high school that year. I took 3 years off. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Took 3 years doing an internship with a local theater company. Then I decided I wanted to write musicals, so I went to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and flunked out after 1 semester because I, didn't know that I had a learning disability. So that summer, I started taking some community college classes, discovered programming and my love for programming. Just a brief history. Went to a programming boot camp that promised to give you the skills to get a job without having to get a degree. And then I spent several years trying to get a job with to no avail. Finally, I landed a job at a very small company in home decor as the e-commerce product data manager. And I chose not to disclose that I had a learning disability. I think the owner of that company to this day does not know that I'm on the spectrum. And at first it seemed really great. I mean, I enjoyed the work I was doing. All of the feedback that I was getting was positive, or so I thought. It was very hard to understand what was expected of me. That wasn't clear. So I just gave it my best guess and did what I thought was expected of me. And interpreted the mostly positive feedback I was getting as confirmation that I must be doing this right. That was incorrect. And in fact, I for whatever reason, the owner of the company and my supervisor didn't feel comfortable sharing any critical feedback with me. So he was very unhappy with my performance and didn't tell me. So finally, I got fired after about 2 months. And I walked in to the office, and there was my first performance review, the only performance review I ever received, with a huge list of things that I had been doing wrong, all of which not only did I not realize were a problem, but which I would have been happy to fix, would have been happy to change if that had been, if I had been made aware of that. And also, I think most of the things on that list were things that stem directly from my LD, from my learning difference. I mean, I don't like to put it this way, but if I had disclosed, there might have been some recourse I could have had for being fired for things related directly to my learning disability. But since I hadn't disclosed that, I didn't have any recourse. Earlier, I had taken a work readiness class, and failed, mostly due to my learning disability. But because I didn't disclose, there wasn't anything I could do. But except to take the class again. I did pass it the second time, but just barely. So fast forward to coming to Landmark, this summer I landed an internship with Prudential Insurance. You can guess that by the fact that I'm willing to say their name, this internship went much better than the internship with the company who is remaining nameless. and they specifically seek out neurodiverse talent. They hire people on the spectrum not in spite of their disability, but because of their talent. And many of these companies are starting to realize that being neurodiverse can actually be a good thing. We may need supports that other people don't need, but we also will have insights that other people don't have, or notice things that other people don't notice. And yes, sometimes that gets in the way, and sometimes it makes it difficult to communicate with us. I had a little blurb that I put in my applications. I would say, if there was a box to say, do you have a diagnosis in one of these categories? And I would put a note that said, I checked the box that I have one of the listed disabilities only because I have been diagnosed with autism, which is on that list. I do not consider myself disabled. Rather, I believe that my neurodiversity actually makes me a better programmer. And with minimal accommodation, I can be an asset to this company. So that's what I've been doing. And I'm currently set to graduate with my associate's degree from Landmark in spring of 2022. And I'm starting my job search.
Thanks for sharing all that, Wolf. Very nicely done. So we do have some questions coming in, and I just want to remind viewers, if you have other questions, please do type them in the Q&A box, and we will store them up for the end of our presentation. And I'm very excited now to introduce our special guest, Denise Brody, who is a senior contributor at Forbes and the founder of Rebel Talent. Hello, Denise.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me. And thanks for sharing. Those stories were great. I mean, the points of view, I think, that many people don't hear so truthfully and honestly. And I just appreciate, and I think more employers are appreciating that upfront look. And you know, as I saw, you don't have to tell everything, right? Warts and all, but you get you each, Wolf and Rachel and Andrew, each disclosed certain things that were relatable and that they could talk about. So, that's a huge deal. And I guess that's what I call being a rebel talent is being really honest and just approaching things from the point of view of, being visible, that you have the right to be visible and that you're not deficient. So I don't know, Mark, if you have those slides, I'll go through some of the things may overlap, but we'll see. So, I always say never say the word disability. There's nothing wrong with the word disability, but I just think in your head, at this point in our lives in this generation, maybe it's starting to change. But for older people who are in the workforce, disability means a wheelchair, a hearing aid, something they don't understand, they don't get, that's an impairment. And so until that changeover happens, until there's more younger people, I just don't use it. So I try to say, be comfortable and know how to be visible, make your disability visible if it's invisible. So next slide. So as you can see, I'm wearing the same shirt. That's me. I have lived experience, and when I write, the major difference between me and everybody else who's out there, speaking the gospel and doing great work, is that I don't think that most people have ever seen someone write in a business format in the first person saying that their experience with neurodiversity is X, and this is what they want people to know. And I've gotten a lot of really great feedback on the fact that, seeing my name in Forbes makes other people feel so much better. They share those articles, they talk about them, or people ask, get their questions answered just by reading some of my stuff. So that's a really, it's a great feeling. And I think from what I see, there'll be more and more people like me coming forward. That's not how I experienced life. And I'm in my 50s, so you can imagine. I never disclosed. I didn't find out till I was 40, so when I had my son. And that's when I wrote this book called The Elephant in the Playroom, which was to talk about all the things nobody wants to talk about. So next slide. How do I know this actually works? Which is a very good question, because I could just be spewing this out to you. I've worked with a lot of companies, and I've written for a lot of companies, and they've all said the way in which you write and you describe the issues, or you describe the talent, and the way you are positive is really influential, and it's very helpful. So just like the people you just heard, if you go to the next slide, you'll see. You can go to the next slide too. Apparently I have a problem with too many slides. Okay, so I think I just spoke about this, but there is one fact that I had found, which is 92% of businesses encourage employees with a disability to self-identify. They get credit for that also, so they would like to know who they have on their roster, who's a veteran or who is disabled. It helps them to get federal contracts and things like that. But even with a confidential reporting process, even with the best HR department, 3.7% of people do or did that. I think the statistic is from 2019. So you can see, there's a lot of room for each side to grow. Next slide. So Mark and I were talking about, how do you know your story, right? How do you know all these facts, and people have been throwing all these things at you. You're so good at this. Well, this is your weakness. But actually, I found that being neurodiverse and literally not going near any machinery, no computers, nothing, and talking through my story really helps me to create a storyline. And it says, oh, wow, I can then take that storyline, record it, and put it on paper, and then parse it into pieces, and that's what goes on my resume. So that my skills and talents are part of my story. And the way I work and the things that I've achieved are also part of my story. And the talking about it to a friend, to yourself, to the wall, to the mirror, to the dog, doesn't matter. There's something freeing about it. And you stop, getting overly overworked about all of the details. So that's create a storyline. And the next slide. So practice the storyline. I find if I don't practice things, I get really rigid. I look like I'm, my shoulders are creeping up. I was at an event the other day with my daughter, and she said, "What's wrong with your shoulders, Mom?" They're like next to your ears. And sometimes you have to ask someone to point that out for you. But fear is really going to ruin you in terms of it sort of covers up so many of those assets. And you want to find a middle ground, where, yes, so you're a little scared, but you're not freaking out, and your shoulders aren't up here, but they're sort of okay, and you'll get better and better at it. But it's practice. Next slide. So, Mark, when you talked about your intern and other people spoke about communicating you clearly, the same things that worked in your office, like putting structure around your day, saying, I may not be in at 9:05, but I do really well when I grab a cup of coffee, sit outside for 5 minutes, and pull myself together, and at 9:15, I'm going to walk in the door, if that's okay. I just need a break from my commute or whatever it is. I get nauseous on the bus. It could be anything. Or I don't have time to eat breakfast, and I want to make sure I eat my breakfast. Any routine or ritual that you do is a great way to just kick off a really good day. And then also I'm a supply closet geek, so I'm constantly using Post-its, Google Docs, putting things in different colors. And, I don't really care whether people understand it or not. But I do try and explain it to them, and I do try to say, even though I'm not working like you, I have the same goals, and I know what my goals are. And I tell people, this is how I'm going to work throughout the week so that I get to the goal. It's a lot of communicating like the nuts and bolts of things you just think everybody might know or agree upon, and they don't. So the next slide. Clear the air. Again, ask questions, be blunt. This is really hard to do, but like in Wolf's situation, he didn't even have the chance to be blunt, right? He didn't get the chance to say, why don't you like the final product that I've given you? Or how would you change it? Or what worries you most? Be very upfront about, I'm not trying to make things perfect or beautiful. I'm working for you. I want to do the best job possible. And that's why I'm asking you these questions. And don't be put off by the fact that some people won't be able to answer them. And that's their problem, not yours, right? So that creates another discussion about maybe we should narrow the focus of the project, or maybe we should bring in more people, right? It sort of nips all that trouble, that pollution in the air, and clears everything up. So, and then of course, people will probably spend a little more time with you than others, and thank them for their advice so that they come back and help you do the same thing again. Next slide. I have this feeling that most people aren't paying attention to much these days, even myself. So it's a give and take. I asked for something, and if it appears that the person hasn't heard me because I mumbled or because I was walking by quickly, whatever it is, ask again. And then also, even if someone's door is closed, knock on the door or send them an email to say, okay, I'm swamped. What's the most important thing I need to get done today? And, that way, this all leads to one thing, which is make yourself valuable and not vulnerable. So all of the stories you heard before, people made themselves valuable ultimately, not vulnerable. And yeah, being vulnerable by talking about your neurodiversity is okay, but it doesn't have to stay front and center all the time. Once you've gotten over the vulnerable hump, you're on to valuable. And you can, take a good look at yourself and realize, yeah, I did that, or I didn't do that, and just be humble about it and appreciate the feedback. Nobody's perfect, and it's business. I always say to myself, it's business, it's not personal. So next slide. So about that human resources thing, when I was younger, someone said to me, human resources isn't your friend. And I was so sad. I was like, what do you mean they're not my friend? They hired me. They gave me all this paperwork. They showed me how to get my benefits. They're so nice, right? But actually, as many people know better than I did at that time, going to human resources is not just a conversation. It's not having tea or coffee or bringing a friendly brownie to someone who helped onboard you. You need to come with a set of concerns. You need to bring backup and think carefully about what led you originally to want to go into HR and not talk to your coworkers or your boss. Again, you're looking not for a conversation. You're looking for change and validation or some sort of revised work environment. So list out the things you think have gone well, things that haven't, and the supports that you will need, and just make them super brief. And I think that is disclosure. That finally, when you get to that point where you just know you need to tell people what you need, it takes the awkward out of it, and you're willing to disclose. And that may take a year. It may take a month. It's different for everyone. But don't count it out. And I think Jen is right. I think there's little recourse if you don't. There's little recourse even with your coworkers who you might have thought of as people who would give you recommendations and things like that. So, think about working up to disclosure, I guess I would say, but still being very clear. And then the other part, there's the Jan network. This is where that statistic comes from. The 73% of employers who made work-related adjustments to accommodate workers said it was easy to do so. And I think, I don't know the number, Jan, but I think it's like less than $300 or less than $500 to accommodate someone. And that's really an amazing number. That's a great thing to know. You probably already know what you need. They don't even have to spend that much time doing it. I need a microphone. I need headphones. I need a taller desk, whatever it is, right? So make sure you understand that asking to be accommodated is not a huge problem or nightmare. It just is. It just is. So, next slide. So everything I heard anyway, I love the stories, and I would urge you to tell your stories to people, not necessarily your boss or to the person that you're looking to get hired from, but so many of those little tips, like have a sentence or two that you put with the box when you check disability. That's brilliant. It's just brilliant, right? And Rebecca saying each day, this is, I'm going to get this PowerPoint anyway, but just in case, I'm going to ask, these are the things I need to process, and this is the amount of time I need to process. That's no one but us thinks like that, right? They're just not, you're so used to it, you don't know it, but that's a brilliant way for Rebecca to have gotten things done. And then finally, on Andrew's part, I really suspect that there are so many people in the workforce who have children who are neurodiverse. And they have ADHD, they have, whatever it is, they're either coming up on a diagnosis or they have teenagers who are struggling through it. And those people will immediately get it. And it is so, their welcome, it will be so heartfelt more than anyone else. And so I would not discount that 25% of people are neurodiverse. So there's people around you who aren't saying anything. You're not alone. You're not the only one. So keep up the good work.
Thanks so much, Denise. Great presentation. You have quite a few questions that have come in. And one, Denise, you actually addressed a little bit about the cost of accommodation. So one of our viewers is asking, would an employee be paid less if she costs the employer more money when she is accommodated?
No, I mean, Jan Copeland, Jan, you would know, that's just baloney. You're not a cost center, you're an employee. So.
And I would add for that individual who posted the question, to kind of build on what Wolf said, what's exciting is in the neurodiversity movement in the workplace, businesses are finding the individuals who are neurodiverse are actually positively influencing the company's profit margin. So if you are getting the support you need, you most likely will impact the success of that business.
Right, so that $400 could turn into $4,000 over the course of a month. Don't be in any way belittled by someone asking you a question. They just don't know. That's all. It's lack of education.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions about for our alumni and student speakers. One is saying all speakers are well spoken, and for those who are more shy who aren't comfortable disclosing, does Landmark assist you with this skill? And a related question, before you came to and then later graduated from Landmark, were you as eloquent in explaining your needs and accommodations, or did you learn that at Landmark? Did you learn at Landmark what those accommodations were and how to express them?
Well, I can say before coming to Landmark, I didn't accept the fact that I was different. So I was not particularly well versed in advocating for myself. It was more a rejection of the fact more than anything. And truthfully, that's what Landmark gave me. The biggest lift I got in my life at Landmark was accepting that I was different and that was okay. So as far as being well spoken about it, no. It took a lot of time and effort to really synthesize it in my own head. Because you can read all you want about ADHD or executive function or any of these other things, but you have to ultimately boil it down to what does that mean for you? And that's really what I was able to distill out of it and what I ultimately explained to folks. As far as the help I received at Landmark, I was never coded, so to speak, as a child. Like I didn't have an IEP in elementary school or junior high or high school or anything like that. So what I learned the most was that there are accommodations. There are specific things you can do. So yeah, I mean, I think Landmark gave me the tools that I needed. And then I was able to take, what I learned and kind of piece it together around, what was me, what was my truth in all of this.
I would also say, for me, if you only take one class at Landmark, I would recommend that it be Perspectives in Learning. That is just about everything else that is taught here, you can get at another university, except that. That is a class all about self-advocacy, what the laws are. I mean, like, there were exams in that class where we said, okay, this the ADA is this, Act 504 is this. I mean, you learn that, you are quizzed on that. You write reports about yourself and what your neurodivergence are, neurodivergencies. I mean, the school motto, the motto of Landmark College is Noce te ipsum, which is Latin for know thyself. I think it's really cool that they took that phrase, which is clearly sort of modern, and translated into Latin, because that is really what we stand for here. And that is what I have noticed Landmark tries to help their students do. So was I as eloquent about talking in general before I came here? I don't know. People who know me might. But in terms of talking about my disability, it certainly gave me a better lexicon to talk about neurodiversity and what my needs are, what accommodations I need, and how I learn best, how I work best, and how to maximize my potential so I can be of greatest service to an employer.
I would just quickly add on that I had more of the traditional experience. I was diagnosed very young, so I grew up having like the IEPs and the 504s. But transitioning from high school to Landmark, I can definitively say that if I had not gone to Landmark, I definitely would not be as comfortable self-advocating. I feel like I would eventually have gotten there, but I would not be as steadfast in my confidence to be able to articulate and explain exactly what I need to be as successful, even if not more so than my coworkers in the positions that I've had since I've graduated. Again, your journey through self-advocacy is yours. So whether you're shy now, you come out later, or it's something that you're ready to start today, that's something that you'll have to decide for yourself. But there are tools at Landmark through Jan's office, the different internship opportunities, as well as just day-to-day interactions with your peers and your professors. That's something that you gain and you grow and you'll be able to have when you eventually go into the workforce or when you go back into the workforce.
Thanks, guys. Excuse me. Next question is, how do you find companies that are looking for neurodiverse employees?
I mean, sometimes they find you. Like, we just had two recruiters from Ernst & Young, and I forget what the other one was. Jan set that up, and they came to campus, and they were looking for neurodiverse talent. Jan also has a bunch of connections with companies that are looking for that. That's really her job. So yeah, that's what I've found helpful.
Mark, I had one thought, which is, because I'm a journalist and I think this way, you can do your research through hashtags too, like hashtag hiring, hashtag neurodiversity, and you can do that on Facebook. I find a lot of things on Twitter, and then you keep a list of yourself in a Google Doc, and often they have events and things that they're promoting because they do want to find you, and sometimes there's an in-between person. Like inclusivity is one, they're hiring firms that specialize in doing this. And so wherever you are in your career, you can really just put those two words together, hashtag hiring and hashtag neurodiversity, and you'll be busy for at least a week.
I'd also put out there that, with diversity, equity, and inclusion as a center point of how companies are evolving their cultures today, I would encourage a lot of folks as they're doing their job search research, looking at different companies, to look on their company pages. Many companies, when they create initiatives around diversity, equity, inclusion, team member resource groups, things like that, they want to sing this from the mountaintops. They want people to know that this truly is an inclusive place. We are truly, looking for you to be here. So I would do some research there. Denise's point, certainly social media, LinkedIn is a fantastic place to find employers and to be found. And many of them have company pages where they're constantly updating content, and you'll usually find these sort of initiatives or updates around what they're doing. A lot of companies are also hiring executives. So if you just want to search for people, look for, diversity officer or diversity manager, find what company they're at, and you can start to spider your way out from there.
Jan, did you want to jump in with anything there?
No, I would just say that if any student wants career counseling or we have a whole array of resources for students who want to identify what these companies are. And Wolf is right. We have many partnerships and are developing more partnerships, but we belong to the Neurodiversity Hub, which is a great website where it lists resources for employment searches, but also companies that have neurodiverse hiring programs.
Great, thank you. Have a few more minutes and a couple more questions. Excuse me, the next one is, what are the consequences of disclosing or not disclosing? I think we heard a little bit of that, but if anyone would like to jump in and expand on that a bit.
Yeah, I think I've gone over the consequences of not disclosing, so.
I mean, I can share a little bit from my own experience. I mean, my experience in not disclosing, the fact that I operate differently or just sharing how that works, is the consequence is the perception. I think all of us who are neurodiverse have either heard or been labeled different things in the past, whether it's lazy, dumb, unmotivated, unengaged, whatever the case might be. By disclosing, you provide context to why someone might have a perception like that. Without disclosing, and this is the self-advocacy piece, people will have their perceptions, and unfortunately in this world, perceptions are reality for them. So I think the consequence in not disclosing in many cases is we don't take control over the perceptions around us, how people view us, all that. The consequences of disclosing. As far as negative ones, I mean, I think there's legal barriers to that. And I would say the positive consequences are, the positive perception, a greater level of success, a greater level of relief and confidence in being able to be successful. And when you feel supported by your company, it feels a lot easier to support them every single day going to work, doing your job. So it almost becomes a snowball effect in not just work, but in your life as you gain that additional confidence.
I would jump on that train of thought and just say that the biggest thing that I found is not disclosing almost is a disservice to myself, because by advocating and by taking that step, whether it is uncomfortable because it's the first time you've done it, or this is your first job or maybe only your second position in the specific field that is your passion, it's something that I find is a necessary uncomfortability, because although it may be awkward or you may feel like that you may not have it all together, by advocating for yourself and taking that step to be able to explain exactly what you need, that's going to be able to give you the sure footing that you need to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and also just doing the job that you want, doing the job that you love. You applied for that position, you want to be in that position. So being able to do it successfully is going to make you not only a better employee, but it's going to have you have a better atmosphere at work. And honestly, that's a huge part of it, is if you feel welcomed at work, you're going to do good work and it's going to be fun to go, because nobody likes to not like their work. So having that component, taking the step to have that self-advocacy is going to be a big step. And again, it's not something that's difficult long-term, but just taking that initial first step is always a great decision, I find.
I think it's also one of the reasons that you might want to not disclose is either that you're in denial that you have anything to disclose, or you're afraid of the perceptions of that. And yes, there are some employers out there who will think less of you if they know that you're have some neurodiversity. I think that number is shrinking, but they are certainly still out there. But then you have to ask the question, if they don't want to hire me because I'm neurodiverse, do I want to be hired by them? I mean, I suppose some people might enjoy working for a company where they have to hide their true self and live in fear that they might be found out. I'm not one of those people. And so if this, so a reason to disclose is it helps you find a good employer. And if they have a problem with that, then thank each other for your time. And let them find someone who they don't have a problem with, and you find someone who doesn't have a problem with you.
Well said. We're a little past 7:30, but I do have one more question I'd like to fit in from the employer's perspective that maybe Jan or Denise could jump in on. So someone's asking, in the future, I envision myself as an employer. What kind of accommodations would you recommend to factor into the workplace for someone who's new to this topic?
Well,
I can start, and then Denise, do you want to start? And if there's anything I should add?
all I would say is, if you, I hate to keep harping on this one site, but if you go to, if you go to the Jan network, it's askjan.com, or yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. We could put it in the notes, but there are all these stories. So it says so and so needed this, so and so went through this, and literally you get through the story. Oh, that it was too noisy. It was too much driving. You know, it could. Everybody's different. So you know, like my son took a job at a paint company. He loves cars. He didn't have any great interest in paint, and the numbers on the paint cans were so small and driving him so nuts because of his learning disability. He went in and he said, I'd be a much better driver. Right? So sometimes it's just a matter of changing the tasks around. And, you know, he could park a huge van full of paint and not scratch the car or ruin anything. And that was an asset. So.
This is kind of a
It's really
cliche.
individualized.
What did you say?
Sorry. Jan, you want to
Jan?
I think I agree with Denise. I think it's very individualized. There's no sort of blanket accommodation. But what I find is universal is having companies, if you're starting your own company or you're considering hiring somebody that's neurodiverse, strong supervision, good supervisors, people who are good communicators, provide tools, things that are written, strong leaders. That's sort of the blanket way to be a neurodiverse friendly company. And then you can get into the nuances based on the individual's needs. And more often than not, they're not expensive.
They also you could have a job shadow. I just wrote a piece in Forbes about an entrepreneur who took on 3 or 4 people to bake for her. And she didn't know how it was going to go, but turns out each one loved a different kind of thing. And now they're so good that people are after her to say, where did you get these guys? we want to do this too. And she's paying them very fairly, and they're loving the work and they're working hard. And they do check in with a job shadow from, I think, whatever inclusion service they started at. So, you know, you can find through the community, you can find places where they're looking to help people get the vocational skills they need to work. That's the main goal. So every community has it, depending, you know, it just depends where it is hidden. Sometimes it's right out there in front.
In case anyone hasn't heard the joke as it goes, or the saying as it goes, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So there's very little that can be generalized. There are a few things, and I think Jan and Denise have touched on those, but it's very individualized, and you really do need to get to know the employee and ask them what they need.
An open mind. I think that is the best accommodation.
Yes, that can be generalized.
It's a great note to end on. Thank you, everyone who watched. Someone did ask if this has been recorded and will be shared afterwards, and it will be. There'll actually be an email going out. You're probably on our email. Actually, you're definitely on our email list if you're watching because you registered for the event. So an email will be going out with the link probably tomorrow. But if you don't receive that, you can email me at marketing@landmark.edu. In fact, if you have any questions that were not answered tonight that you would like answered, you can also email marketing@landmark.edu, and we will connect you with the right people and you get those questions answered. So Andrew, Rachel, Wolf, Jan, Denise, thank you very much. Excellent talk tonight, and have a great night, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.